The massive chamber stretched out like a cathedral of power, its crystalline walls pulsing with soft blue light. Hundreds of alien beings sat in tiered rows, their various forms creating a bizarre symphony of colors and shapes. Some had multiple arms, others floated in spheres of energy, and a few looked like walking trees with glowing eyes. This was the Hegemony Council, the ruling body that had controlled most of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. Admiral Vexmore stood at the center podium, his scaled hands moving across a holographic display that showed star maps scattered, with red warning markers. Each red dot represented a human colony, and there were far too many of them for the Council's comfort. His reptilian features twisted into what might have been concern as he gestured at the expanding network of human settlements. "Look at this growth pattern," Vexmore said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. 30 years ago, humans were confined to a single star system. Today, they have established permanent colonies in 17 different systems. Their industrial output has doubled every 5 years without fail. Their population growth exceeds all our projections. A murmur rippled through the assembled aliens. Some species had taken centuries to expand beyond their home systems. Others had never managed to establish more than 3 or 4 stable colonies. Yet these newcomers, these humans, were spreading across space like some kind of unstoppable force. Counselor Zethra, whose people resembled giant mantises, clicked her mandibles nervously. "What about the buffer zones we established? Surely they understand the importance of maintaining neutral space between established territories?" Vexmore's expression darkened. "That brings us to the real problem. We have sent 3 formal warnings, through diplomatic channels. Each time we clearly explained that their expansion violated established galactic law. Each time we offered them alternative systems they could colonize without threatening existing trade routes or strategic positions." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle over the chamber. "Each time, they have ignored us completely." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers and angry hisses. For millennia, the Hegemony's word had been absolute law. When they told a species to stop expanding, that species stopped. When they designated certain areas as off-limits, those areas remained untouched. The very idea that someone would simply ignore their authority was almost incomprehensible. Archon Drelthak, the oldest being in the chamber, slowly rose from his throne-like seat. His species had evolved from something resembling a cross between an octopus and a jellyfish, and his movements were fluid and hypnotic. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "What exactly did the humans say in response to our final ultimatum?" he asked. Vexmore activated another hologram, this one showing a recorded message. A human male appeared, wearing what looked like a military uniform. His face was calm, almost bored as he spoke. "To the Hegemony Council," the human said. "We have received your messages regarding our colonization efforts. After careful consideration, the Terran Federation has decided that we do not recognize any external authority over sovereign human worlds. We will continue to expand and settle, as we see fit within the bounds of our own laws and ethics. We suggest you focus on governing your own territories and leave us to govern ours." The message ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Several council members began speaking at once, their voices rising in anger and disbelief. "The arrogance," shouted Councillor Vracht, whose crystalline body glowed red with fury. "They dare speak to us as equals?" "This cannot be allowed to stand," added another voice from the crowd. "If word spreads that the hegemony can be ignored, our entire system of order will collapse." Archon Drelthak raised one of his tentacles and immediate silence fell over the chamber. His ancient eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, seemed to glow with inner light as he considered the situation. "In my 800 years of life," he said slowly, "I have seen 43 species attempt to challenge hegemony authority. Some thought their technology superior. Others believed their numbers gave them strength. A few simply thought they could hide in the outer rim territories where our influence was weak." He paused, floating slightly higher above his seat. "All of them learned the same lesson. The hegemony has maintained peace and order in this galaxy because we possess the strength to enforce our will. When diplomacy fails, force succeeds. It has always been this way. The Archon's gaze swept across the chamber, meeting the eyes of dozens of different species. Admiral Vexmore, you will mobilize the 3rd Pacification Fleet immediately. 300 of our finest warships should be more than sufficient to remind these humans of their place in the natural order. Vexmore bowed deeply. It will be done, Archon. How shall we proceed once their resistance is broken? Standard protocol, Drelthak replied. Destroy their military capability, occupy their industrial centers, and relocate their populations to designated worlds where they can be properly supervised. We will allow them to maintain some degree of self-governance, provided they accept hegemony oversight in all matters of expansion and military development. As the council members began filing out to implement their decision, none of them bothered to research humanity's background. They had no interest in studying human culture, human psychology, or human history. In their experience, such knowledge was unnecessary. Overwhelming force had always been sufficient to bring younger species into line. They had no way of knowing that humans had spent the last 10,000 years perfecting the art of warfare against their own kind. They couldn't imagine a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and countless wars only to emerge stronger each time. Most importantly, they had never encountered a people who viewed impossible odds not as a reason to surrender, but as a challenge to overcome. The 3rd Pacification Fleet would launch within the week, confident in their superiority and certain of their victory. After all, what could 300 advanced warships possibly have to fear from a species that had only recently learned to travel between stars? The hegemony had made this calculation 43 times before, and 43 times they had been proven correct. This time would be different. This time, they had chosen to threaten humanity. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the approaching enemy fleet through the massive viewing window. The stars seemed to dim as 300 alien warships moved into position, their hulls reflecting the light of the nearby sun like polished mirrors. Each ship was enormous, easily twice the size of the largest human vessels, and they moved with the precision of a military force that had never known defeat. The alien fleet arranged itself in a formation that looked like a giant arrowhead pointing directly at the human ships. Their vessels were sleek and intimidating, covered in what appeared to be some kind of energy shielding that made them shimmer like mirages. Weapon ports along their hulls glowed with barely contained power, ready to unleash destruction at a moment's notice. Sir, long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures, reported Lieutenant Tayman from the sensor station. Their weapons appear to be some kind of plasma-based system. Power readings are off the charts. Minho nodded calmly. At 55 years old, he had seen enough combat to know that impressive displays were often meant to intimidate rather than demonstrate actual capability. His weathered face, marked by years of military service, showed no concern as he studied the enemy formation. "How many ships do we have in the immediate area?" he asked. 47 combat vessels, sir," replied Commander Yunji from the tactical station. "The rest of the fleet is still 3 hours out." A young ensign at a nearby station looked nervous. "Sir, we're outnumbered more than 6 to 1. Shouldn't we wait for reinforcements?" Minho turned to look at the young officer, his expression gentle but firm. "Son, there are 2 types of military commanders in this universe. Those who wait for perfect conditions and those who work with what they have. The first type usually ends up waiting forever." Communications. Officer Jin Woo suddenly straightened at his station. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the lead enemy vessel. They're demanding to speak with our commanding officer." "Put them through," Minho said, moving to stand directly in front of the main view screen. The screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of what was obviously an alien command bridge. The being that appeared was tall and reptilian, with scales that shifted from green to gold in the light. Its eyes were large and predatory, and its mouth was filled with sharp teeth. The creature wore what appeared to be an elaborate military uniform covered in medals and insignia. "I am Fleet Marshal Colvin of the 3rd Pacification Fleet," the alien announced, its voice carrying a tone of absolute authority. You are in violation of hegemony territorial claims and have ignored multiple warnings to cease your illegal expansion. I am authorized to offer you one final opportunity to surrender." The alien paused, its large eyes studying Minho with what might have been curiosity. "You will power down your weapons, lower your shields, and prepare to be boarded. Your vessels will be impounded, and your crews will be relocated to designated worlds where they can cause no further trouble. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your fleet." Minho listened to the entire speech without changing expression. Around the bridge, his officers watched their admiral carefully, waiting to see how he would respond to this obvious threat. The silence stretched for several long seconds as Minho appeared to consider the alien's words. Then something unexpected happened. Minho began to chuckle. It started as a small sound, barely audible, but quickly grew into full-fledged laughter. The sound echoed through the bridge as the admiral threw back his head and laughed with genuine amusement. The alien commander's expression shifted from confidence to confusion. "You find our terms amusing?" Minho wiped tears from his eyes, his laughter gradually subsiding. "Marshal Colvan, I have to apologize. It's not that your terms are funny exactly. It's just that you remind me of something my grandfather used to tell me when I was young." "I fail to see the relevance," Colvan replied, his voice growing colder. "My grandfather fought in the old wars back on Earth," Minho explained, his tone becoming conversational. "He used to say that the most dangerous moment in any battle was when your enemy was so confident they forgot to be careful. He said you could always tell when someone had won too many easy fights because they started believing their own reputation." The alien's scaled features twisted into what might have been anger. "Are you suggesting that the hegemony's reputation is undeserved?" Minho shook his head, still smiling. "Not at all. I'm sure you've won plenty of battles. The problem is you've been fighting the wrong kind of wars. Explain yourself." "You see, Marshal, your people have spent centuries conquering species that were either too primitive to fight back effectively or too civilized to understand what real warfare looks like. You've been playing a game where the rules favor the biggest, most advanced military. But humans don't play by those rules." Minho stepped closer to the view screen, his expression becoming more serious. "We're a species that spent 10,000 years trying to wipe ourselves out and somehow managed to become stronger instead of extinct. We've fought wars with sticks and stones, with swords and guns, with nuclear weapons and biological agents. We've turned our own planet into a battlefield, so many times that war is literally in our DNA." The alien commander's confident posture began to shift slightly. "Your primitive conflicts are irrelevant against advanced military technology." "That's where you're wrong," Minho replied. "Technology is just tools. War is about will, about determination, about the refusal to give up, even when everything looks hopeless. And Marshal, you have no idea how stubborn humans can be when someone threatens our families." Around the bridge, the human crew had stopped looking nervous. Instead, they were beginning to smile, understanding something that the alien commander clearly didn't grasp. "You have 30 seconds to surrender," Colvan snarled. "After that, we will demonstrate why the hegemony has ruled this galaxy for millennia." Minho's smile widened. "Marshal, you're about to learn why Earth's children don't stay down when you knock them over. Jinwoo, open a channel to all ships. Channel." "Open, sir." Minho's voice carried to every human vessel in the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Minho. Our guests seem to think they can intimidate us into surrender. I think it's time we showed them what humans do when someone threatens our people. All ships, weapons free. Let's give them a proper welcome." The alien commander's eyes widened as he realized that his intimidation tactics had not only failed, but had somehow made the humans more confident rather than less. For the first time in his long military career, Fleet Marshal Colvan began to wonder if perhaps the hegemony had made a serious miscalculation. Fleet Marshal Colvan raised his primary arm, and 300 hegemony warships opened fire simultaneously. The space between the two fleets suddenly blazed with deadly light as massive plasma cannons unleashed their fury. These were the same weapons that had turned entire planets into balls of molten rock, the same devastating firepower that had broken the will of dozens of species across the galaxy. The plasma bolts streaked through space like miniature suns, each one carrying enough energy to vaporize a city. They had never failed before. No shield technology in known space could withstand this level of concentrated destruction. The alien crews watched with satisfaction, already planning how they would divide up the human territories once this brief demonstration was over. But something impossible happened. The plasma bolt struck the human fleet and simply vanished. They didn't explode against shields and brilliant displays of light. They didn't cause any visible damage or even create energy feedback. The deadly weapons. Fire just disappeared into what looked like empty space around the human ships. What? Kolvan whispered, his reptilian features twisting in confusion. Fire again. All weapons, maximum power. The second volley was even more intense than the first. Every weapon on every hegemony ship fired at once, creating a wall of destructive energy that should have been impossible to survive. The plasma storm lit up the darkness of space like a newborn star, and for a moment, the alien crews were confident that no technology could withstand such overwhelming force. Again, the energy simply disappeared. The human ship sat there completely undamaged, as if they had just absorbed the power of 300 warships without even noticing. Impossible, Kolvan snarled, his claws digging into his command chair. Nothing can absorb that much directed energy. Our weapons have destroyed everything we've ever fired them at. Admiral Minho's voice came through the communication channel, still carrying that same tone of quiet amusement that had infuriated the alien commander from the beginning. Marshal, I tried to explain this to you earlier. You're fighting a species that learned warfare by trying to kill each other for 10,000 years. We've had a lot of practice dealing with things that are supposed to be impossible to survive. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Lieutenant Tae-min was monitoring the enemy's confused attempts to understand what was happening. Sir, they're running every type of scan they have. Looks like they can't figure out how our defensive systems work. Minho nodded calmly. Of course they can't. They've been conquering primitive worlds for so long, they forgot that some species actually fight back and develop countermeasures. Jin Woo, open a channel to their flagship. The view screen flickered to life again, showing Kolvan's bridge in chaos. Alien officers were shouting reports and running diagnostic checks on their weapons systems. The fleet marshal himself looked like he was about to explode with frustration. Having some technical difficulties? Minho asked politely. Your shields are impossible, Kolvan roared. No known technology can simply absorb unlimited energy without any form of feedback or overload. Minho shrugged. Marshal, you keep using that word impossible. I don't think it means what you think it means. You see, when humans encounter something that seems impossible, we don't give up and call it magic. We study it, we experiment with it, and we figure out how to either do it ourselves or find a way around it. Around the human fleet, something was beginning to happen that the aliens didn't immediately notice. The human ships were starting to move, but not in the rigid formations that the hegemony expected from military vessels. Instead, they began flowing through space like a school of predatory fish, each ship following its own path while somehow maintaining perfect coordination with the others. What are they doing? Whispered one of Kolvan's tactical officers, a being that resembled a giant spider with too many eyes. The human ships weren't moving in straight lines or predictable patterns. They curved and twisted through space, some diving below the plane of battle while others climbed above it. A few ships suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, while others seemed to slow down and drift. Yet somehow every movement seemed purposeful, as if each captain knew exactly where every other ship was going to be at any given moment. It's like they're dancing, another alien officer observed with obvious confusion. How can they coordinate so many vessels without any apparent command structure? Kolvan was beginning to realize that he was seeing something completely outside his experience. The hegemony fought battles with massive ships arranged in perfect formations, following predetermined battle plans that had been refined over centuries. But these humans moved like living creatures, adapting and responding to threats with an organic fluidity that seemed impossible to achieve with mechanical vessels. All ships engage evasive maneuvers, Kolvan ordered. Target the largest human vessels and concentrate fire. But the human ships were no longer where the hegemony targeting systems expected them to be. They flowed around the incoming plasma fire like water flowing around rocks, never quite being where the weapons were aimed. It was as if they could predict exactly where each shot would go before it was even fired. Then, without any warning or dramatic buildup, the humans fired back. The human weapons were different from anything the hegemony had ever encountered. Instead of the brilliant plasma cannons that most advanced species preferred, the human ships unleashed weapons that seemed to bend the very fabric of space itself, beams of energy that twisted through dimensions, projectiles that ignored conventional physics, and devices that turned the enemy's own technology against them. The first hegemony ship to be hit simply stopped existing, not destroyed, not blown apart, but erased from reality as if it had never been there at all. The second ship folded in on itself like paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. The third began to phase in and out of normal space, its crew trapped in some kind of dimensional loop. "What are those weapons?" Kolvan screamed, watching his perfect formation dissolve into chaos as ship after ship fell to the impossible human technology. Minho's voice came through the comm again, no longer amused, but deadly serious. "Marshal, you wanted to know what humans learned from 10,000 years of warfare? We learned that if someone has a bigger stick than you don't try to find an even bigger stick. You find a completely different kind of weapon that makes sticks irrelevant." The space battle was becoming a rout. The hegemony ships, designed to fight conventional enemies using conventional tactics, found themselves completely outmatched by human vessels that seemed to operate by entirely different rules. Their formation advantages meant nothing when the enemy refused to fight in formation. Their superior numbers were useless when human weapons could eliminate multiple targets with single shots. "This is impossible," Kolvan repeated, but his voice now carried a note of desperation rather than anger. "There's that word again," Minho replied. "Marshal, let me give you some free advice. The next time someone warns you that you have no idea what you're walking into, maybe you should listen." As more hegemony ships disappeared from the battlefield, Fleet Marshal Kolvan began to understand that his people had made a terrible mistake. They hadn't encountered a primitive species ripe for conquest. They had challenged a civilization that had turned warfare into an art form, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. The lesson was just beginning. The emergency klaxons echoed through the crystalline halls of the hegemony capital as urgent messages flooded in from across the galaxy. High Counselor Vexistar rushed through the corridors, his forearms clutching data tablets that contained the most shocking military reports in hegemony history. The massive doors to the emergency council chamber slid open with a hiss, revealing a scene of barely controlled chaos. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting over each other, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, hisses, and electronic tones. Some were demanding explanations, others were calling for immediate action, and a few were already talking about defensive measures for their own worlds. "Order! Order!" Archon Drelthak's voice boomed through the chamber, his ancient authority, finally silencing the crowd. "Counselor Vexitar, report." Vexitar's scales had turned a pale shade of blue, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "Archon, I regret to inform the Council that we have lost all contact with the Third Pacification Fleet. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures in the target system approximately 6 hours ago. When our scout ships arrived to investigate, they found only debris fields and radiation. The chamber fell into stunned silence. 300 warships gone without a trace. It was unthinkable. "Survivors?" asked Counselor Zethra, her mantis-like head tilting in disbelief. 17 escape pods were recovered, Vextar replied grimly. "The crews are in shock. They keep talking about impossible weapons, about human ships that moved like living creatures, about technology that defied every law of physics they understood." Archon Drelthak's tentacles writhed slowly as he processed this information. In 800 years of life, he had never heard of an entire hegemony fleet being destroyed so completely. "What about Fleet Marshal Kolvan?" "No trace of his flagship has been found, Archon. We must assume he was killed in action." A new voice cut through the whispers and murmurs that had begun to fill the chamber. Supreme Admiral Thelnox stepped forward, his massive form casting shadows across the floor. His species resembled walking mountains, with rocky skin and glowing crystals embedded in their foreheads. He had commanded hegemony fleets for over 3 centuries and had never lost a single engagement. Archon, with your permission, I would like to address the council, Thelnox said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. Drelthak nodded. Speak, Admiral. Thelnox moved to the center of the chamber, his presence commanding immediate attention. Fellow councilors, what happened to the Third Pacification Fleet is indeed shocking, but we must not allow this single defeat to cloud our judgment. Yes, we underestimated the humans. Yes, we failed to properly assess their military capabilities. These are mistakes we can learn from. He paused, letting his words sink in. However, the fundamental facts remain unchanged. The hegemony has ruled this galaxy for over 2 millennia because we possess superior numbers, superior technology, and superior coordination. One fleet, even a large one, does not represent the full might of our civilization. Councillor Vracht's crystalline body pulsed with nervous energy. What are you suggesting, Admiral? I am suggesting that we respond with overwhelming force, Thelnox replied. Not 300 ships, but 1,200. Not a single fleet, but the First Armada itself. Every advanced warship we possess, equipped with our most powerful weapons, led by our most experienced commanders. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some councillors supported the plan, arguing that the hegemony's reputation was at stake. Others worried about leaving their core worlds undefended. A few questioned whether even 1,200 ships would be enough if the humans possessed weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Archon Drelthak raised a tentacle for silence. Admiral Thelnox, you understand the risks involved. If we commit the First Armada and fail, we leave ourselves vulnerable to attack from other enemies. Archon, no species in known space has ever stood against the full might of the First Armada, Thelnox replied confidently. The humans may have advanced weapons, but they are still a young species with limited industrial capacity. They cannot possibly have enough ships to match our numbers. The vote was closer than expected, but the decision was made. The First Armada would be mobilized immediately, with Supreme Admiral Thelnox in command. Ships would be pulled from every sector of hegemony space, creating the largest military force assembled in over 500 years. Meanwhile, millions of miles away beneath the surface of Earth's moon, a very different kind of war council was taking place. The Luna Command Center had been carved out of solid rock during humanity's early expansion into space, and its walls were lined with holographic displays showing the positions of human ships across 17 star systems. Admiral Minho stood at the center of the room, still wearing his battle-stained uniform from the recent engagement. Around him, the most senior officers of the Terran Federation military studied reports and tactical analyses with the calm professionalism that had carried humanity through countless conflicts. Commander So Young approached, carrying a data tablet filled with intelligence reports. At 35, she was one of the youngest officers to reach her rank, but her analytical mind had proven invaluable in understanding alien military tactics. Sir, our intelligence networks are reporting massive fleet movements throughout hegemony space, she said, her voice steady despite the implications of her report. It looks like they're pulling ships from every major sector. Preliminary estimates suggest they're assembling a force of over 1,000 vessels. Captain Dongwu, the head of strategic planning, whistled softly. That's 4 times larger than the fleet they just sent against us. Minho nodded slowly, his weathered face showing no surprise. They're escalating, exactly what we expected them to do. Sir, with respect, shouldn't we be concerned? Asked Lieutenant Colonel Haijin, who commanded the defense installations around Earth. Even with our technological advantages, those are impressive numbers. Minho turned to look at the holographic display showing human fleet positions. 47 ships had faced 300 hegemony vessels and won decisively. But now we're talking about over 1,000 enemy ships, possibly more. Commander So Young, what's the status of our shipyards? He asked. Production is ahead of schedule, sir. We should have an additional 80 vessels ready for combat within the week. The new industrial complexes in the asteroid belt are exceeding all projections. And our research teams? Several breakthrough technologies are ready for field testing, Admiral. The engineering corps is confident they can be integrated into our existing ships within days. Minho smiled, the same expression that had unnerved Fleet Marshal Colvan just hours earlier. Gentlemen, ladies, let me remind you of something. The hegemony has been conquering primitive worlds for centuries. They've gotten used to winning through intimidation and overwhelming numbers. But humans don't surrender just because the odds look bad. He gestured toward the tactical displays showing the debris fields where the third pacification fleet had been destroyed. They're about to send everything they have against us, convinced that sheer numbers will carry the day. They still don't understand what they're dealing with. Captain Dongwu leaned forward. What are your orders, sir? Alert all fleet commanders. Begin implementation of Operation Stubborn Child. It's time the hegemony learned why Earth's children don't stay down when someone tries to knock them over. As the human officers began implementing their battle plans, none of them looked worried. If anything, they seemed energized by the challenge ahead. The hegemony was about to discover that threatening humanity's families was the worst mistake they could possibly make. The space around the hegemony's main battle station turned into a graveyard of twisted metal and burning fuel. What had once been the pride of an ancient empire now drifted as countless pieces of debris, each fragment telling the story of humanity's first major victory among the stars. The battle had raged for 6 brutal hours. Human ships, smaller and supposedly weaker than the massive hegemony vessels, had used tactics that the aliens had never seen before. They struck fast, pulled back, regrouped, and struck again. They coordinated their attacks with a precision that came from centuries of warfare on their own planet. Every human captain knew exactly what their fellow humans would do next, because they all shared the same desperate determination to protect their people. The hegemony commanders had expected an easy fight. Their intelligence reports had described humans as a young species, barely capable of interstellar travel. They had massive ships, advanced weapons, and the experience of ruling the galaxy for thousands of years. How could these newcomers possibly stand against them? They learned the answer as their flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. But the real shock was yet to come. As the last hegemony ship limped away from the battlefield, something appeared on the edge of their most important star system. It wasn't just one ship or even a small fleet. It was an armada unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Minho had brought every available human warship to the hegemony's capital world. Thousands of vessels hung in space like a metal constellation, their weapons trained on the planet below. The world that had ruled over countless species for millennia was now completely defenseless, its protective fleets scattered or destroyed. The communication channels across hegemony space crackled to life. Every ship, every space station, every planet with the ability to receive transmissions suddenly heard the same voice. It was calm, measured, and absolutely terrifying in its quiet confidence. The Admiral's words cut through space like a blade. He spoke not just to the hegemony leadership, but to every species in the galaxy that might be listening. His message was simple and clear, delivered in the kind of tone that left no room for doubt or negotiation. He told them about their broken fleets and defenseless worlds. He reminded them that human ships now controlled the space around their most precious planet. With a few simple commands, he could turn their entire civilization into ash and vapor. The technology existed, the weapons were ready, and no force in the galaxy could stop him if he chose to use them. Then came the pause that made the entire galaxy hold its breath. Instead of destruction, he offered something that shocked every listening species. Mercy was not something they expected from a race that had just torn apart their most powerful military force. But mercy came with a price, and that price was understanding. The Admiral's next words became legendary across the stars, repeated in countless languages and remembered by every species that heard them. He spoke about humanity's nature, about their refusal to be pushed around or threatened. He explained that humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other on their own world, learning lessons in warfare that other species had never needed to learn. They had mastered the art of conflict not because they were naturally violent, but because their world had demanded it. Every human city had been built despite opposition. Every human achievement had come through struggle. Every human child grew up knowing that sometimes you had to fight for what mattered most. Now they had taken those hard-won lessons to the stars, and the galaxy was discovering what that meant. The message continued with a promise that sent shockwaves through every alien government. Humanity would go where humans chose to go. They would settle the worlds they wanted to settle. They would explore the regions of space that called to them, and any species that tried to stop them or threaten human civilians would face the full response of a race that had never learned to back down from a fight. The transmission ended, but its effects rippled across the galaxy for years to come. Ancient species that had ruled for millennia suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders. They began to understand that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted forever. The humans didn't conquer worlds through overwhelming force or cruel domination. Instead, they had done something far more effective. They had demonstrated that they were willing and able to fight anyone who threatened them, but they were also capable of showing restraint when they held absolute power. This combination of strength and wisdom terrified their enemies and impressed their potential allies. The galaxy realized that humanity hadn't just arrived among the stars. They had announced their presence in a way that no one would ever forget.